Good evening, fellow philosophers, and welcome back to another video. As you can see today, the title for the video is going to be Why Islam is a False Religion, Contradictions, Inaccuracies, and Atrocities. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with what Islam is as a religion, I'm gonna go through it on the next slide so you guys can have a little understanding of what Islam is and what their beliefs are. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail because these are things that you should be studying on your own if you are a Christian. You need to understand what other people believe and why they believe it in order to bring people to your faith. If not, well then do a better job. But let's go on to the next slide. What is Islam? What is Quran? And what is the Hadith? Islam is a monotheistic religion, the monotheistic religion of Muslims, and they believe in Allah and they believe in Muhammad as his final prophet. And their holy book is called the Quran, which is what we have right here. That's the Islamic equivalent of the Bible, and the root of the word Quran derives from the Arabic word, and I'm sorry if I butcher this, Iqra, which means recite. The Quran is the Islamic holy scripture, like I mentioned. And why it means recite is because the claim of the Prophet Muhammad was that one day he was in a cave and I guess he was meditating or just chilling in the cave doing whatever psychopaths do in a cave by themselves. And he claimed that the angel Gabriel had overtaken him and forced him to recite. That's the word recite, and that is what the belief is. The Islamic belief is about the Quran is they believe that the Quran is the no contradictions, the perfect word of Allah. It's kind of their belief about the Quran is a tad bit different from the Bible because we believe that the Bible is the inspired word of God. We understand that the Bible was written by men, but we believe those men were inspired by God and through the Holy Spirit. But the Islamic belief about the Quran is it's the actual word of Allah. Therefore, it's perfect, and there should be no inconsistencies within the book. And the second authoritative documents for Islam and Muslims are what called the Hadith. The Hadith is a collection of documents that record the sayings or the words of the Prophet Muhammad. And the Hadith was written by people who lived around Muhammad and people who heard the things he said and saw the things he did, and they decided to write it down. So, with that being said, let's get into the video. I want to start off with a verse in the Quran that's actually contradicted. It's illogical in of itself. And this is Surah 482. Do they not then reflect on the Quran? Had it been from anyone other than Allah, they would have certainly found in it many inconsistencies. Now that's what Allah is saying right here in Surah 482, or rather the author of the Quran, because we know Allah didn't write it. But this is actually illogical, because what Allah is saying is that that the book can a book can only be from God if it doesn't have any inconsistencies, and therefore because it has no contradictions or no inconsistencies, then it must be from Allah. Now, the reason why this is illogical and why this doesn't follow logic is because I could say that about any book. I could pull out Homer, the Odyssey, and the Iliad. I could say, well, you know what, Homer doesn't have any contradictions in the Iliad or the Odyssey. He doesn't contradict himself, so therefore Homer must be God, right? That's Allah's logic. Therefore, Homer must be God, because only a person who's God can write a book with no inconsistencies or no contradictions, and that's just not true. It's illogical. The reason why is because something can have no contradictions and no inconsistencies and be false. It doesn't speak to the truth of the claim at all. So I mean, right there, I could end the video right here and say, boom, there's a logical claim right there. But because people aren't gonna find that simple, I'm gonna have to do a whole video on this. So let's continue. We'll start off with some scientific inaccuracies that are within the Quran. The first one is they were created from a spurting fluid streaming from between the backbone and the rib cage. Surah 86, 6 through 7. And now what Allah is claiming here is that sperm comes from between the backbone and the rib cage, and we know that's false. It's not true. That sperm is it's created and produced in the male testicles. So that's a scientific inaccuracy right there. All it takes, if this is the perfect word of Allah, all it takes is one contradiction in order for it to be wrong in order for it to be proved false and not the word of Allah or God. So I could stop right there, but I'm going to keep going. I could have made a 100-slide presentation on this. I put this together in about an hour and a half because there's a lot of inaccuracies within this book. And then we'll go next. Surah 51:49 says, "And we created pairs of everything that you may contemplate." And what Allah is referring to here is that that in every life form that He's created pairs, that sets of two, male and female. This is also not true. We know that there's animal species that are only female. I think one I was looking at earlier was the whiptail lizard, I believe. It's a species of lizard that's only female, and they reproduce by themselves. So that's scientifically inaccurate. Not every animal, not every species is created in pairs. The next scientific inaccuracy: all living beings roaming the earth and winged birds soaring in the sky are communities like yourselves. We have left nothing out of the record. Surah 6:38. And Allah is also claiming that all animal species live within communities, like humans do. We live within communities, and that's how we survive. But that's also not true. We can look at science and see there's plenty of animals that live in isolation and live by themselves and don't live in communities. You can look it up for yourself and find plenty. So Allah's wrong about this. Allah must have not known His science, or maybe He forgot when He was creating animals. How He did it. Maybe He just forgot. I'm not sure. And let's go. This one's another verse about animals where Allah messes up. Allah has created 4 pairs, a pair of sheep and a pair of goats. Ask them, O Prophet, has He forbidden to you the 2 males of the 2 females, of what is in the wombs of the 2 females? Tell me with knowledge if what you say is true. What he's talking about here is that there's only a certain number of species and only a certain number of goats, and that's also scientifically inaccurate. There's hundreds. There's plenty. There's more than 4. But we understand that the person who was writing the Quran was limited to the world that they lived in and limited to the knowledge that they had in the 6th or 7th century. And so that's what they believed. So they wrote it down. And if you would have read that in the 6th and 7th century, you would have been like, oh man, that's genius. That makes so much sense. But here 1,300 years later, we recognize that that's scientifically false. It's not accurate at all. I'll go on to some more scientific inaccuracies. And indeed, we adorned the lowest heaven with stars like lamps and made them as missiles for stoning eavesdropping devils, for whom we have also prepared the torment of the blaze. So, according to Allah, the stars in the sky are missiles for angels to throw down at devils and demons. I hope I don't have to explain to you what a star is and why that's not possible. If I do, you should click off the video. First of all, stars are extremely far away from the Earth, and not to mention that the vast majority of the stars that we perceive with our eyes don't even exist anymore. The light's just now getting to Earth to where we can perceive them. But it seems that Allah has this conception that the stars are just right there in the sky. Just right there. And, living in the 6th or 7th century, if you were a human on Earth, yeah, you would have that conception of what stars were. They don't look that far away, compared to what they really are. And we have another claim about astronomy, because Allah knows His astronomy. He sure does. The hour has drawn near, and the moon was split in 2. Surah 54:1. I talked about this in the last video, that there's a claim that one of the miracles of the Prophet Muhammad was he split the moon in 2. That's not true. We know the moon's never been split in 2. If it was split in 2, you think about the catastrophic consequences it would have on the Earth. We know the ocean tides are controlled by the moon and things of that nature. And not even to mention that the ancient world was so obsessed with the sky and the stars that if the moon was split in 2, someone would have wrote about it. No one ever wrote about seeing the moon split in 2 in history, ever. The only place that claim exists is right here in the Quran, and it's a ridiculous claim. And He is the one who created the day and the night, the sun and the moon, each traveling in an orbit. Surah 21:33. Now, at first glance, you're probably thinking, oh, well, that one doesn't seem bad. Yeah, the moon travels in an orbit. The sun doesn't. Everything revolves around the sun. That's what the heliocentric model is, that everything revolves around the sun, and the sun has a resting place. It sits. It doesn't move. It sits in the middle of our solar system, and everything revolves around it. So Allah's conception of this is that the sun and the moon are orbiting. Orbiting what? It does that. See, this shows that whoever wrote this book was limited to their 6th or 7th century knowledge of things. If an all-knowing being wrote this Quran, we would understand him to have a really good conception of space and the stars and animal life, but he doesn't. So I would ask you, especially my Muslim friends, how do you justify this? You know, how do you reconcile this belief that an all-knowing person wrote this book and that there's all these inaccuracies and contradictions within the book? I've already went through like 7. All I need to do is go through one, but there's plenty of more. And this presentation is a very minuscule amount of the contradictions and inaccuracies in the Quran. Like I said, I put this presentation together in an hour and a half. I wasn't even trying. Allah is the one who created 7 heavens in layers, and likewise for the earth. The divine descends between them, so you may know that Allah is most capable of everything, and that Allah certainly encompasses all things in His knowledge. So Allah is saying right here that He created 7 heavens and layers, and likewise for the earth, that He created 7 earths. No, there's not 7 Earths. Not even within our solar system. Not even within our galaxy. There's not 7 Earths. I wish there was, so we could find somewhere to live in case the planet was to go to hell. But there's not. Allah seems to, like I said, He doesn't know His astronomy. Do you not see that Allah has subjected to you whatever is in the earth, as well as the ships that sail through the sea by His command? He keeps the sky from falling down on the earth. Now let's stop right there. How the hell is the sky going to fall? Does anyone have a good answer? How is the sky going to fall? Let's go on to the next one. This one's silly. Just reading these things, it's quite silly. I don't understand how you can read this book and think, oh man, this is the wisdom, and this is silly. This is completely unscientific. Then He turned towards the heaven when it was still smoke, saying to the earth, submit willingly or unwillingly. Okay. Let me forget this as well. You can't create the earth before the heavens, first of all, because the earth depends on the heavens in order to exist. We have to have light in order to live. We have to have all these other things in order for the earth to survive. Not only that, but to say that the heavens were smoke. If we're and since the earth is already created, I'm assuming He's referring to space when He talks about the heavens. You can't have smoke in space, because smoke only comes from fire, and there's no oxygen in space because it's a vacuum. Therefore, smoke cannot exist in space. So what is Allah talking about? I don't understand what I don't understand how you can buy into this. It's ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. Those are just some scientific inaccuracies, and not even all of them. It's very, like I said, a very minuscule amount. There's hundreds of more. But with that being said, I would like to get in some of the historical inaccuracies and a lot of the historical mistakes that that the Quran makes, or the author of the Quran makes. Now, a good example of what a historical inaccuracy would look like is because these people were limited to their 6th or 7th century knowledge, and didn't have a very good understanding of the world before them, they would assume that the world that they live in must have always been like that, and that therefore in the past they would have had and done, and that humans in the past would have had and done the same things that they did in their time period. But we understand that that's false. A good example of this would be like living in the modern day now and assuming that because you have a phone now, therefore people 200, 300 years ago had a phone. We know that's not true. So let's go with this first historical inaccuracy, which is about crucifixion. And in this first verse, this is referring to the pharaohs in Egypt threatening people with crucifixion. So let's read it. Pharaoh threatened, "How dare you believe in him before I give you permission? He must be your master who taught you magic. I will certainly cut off your hands and feet on opposite sides, and will crucify you on the trunk of palm trees." What's the problem with this? The problem is that what was going on in Egypt 1,500 years prior, crucifixion was not invented until like 400 or 300 BC. It was invented by the Persians. Um, Not only was it not invented until 400 to 300 BC, but crucifixion never took place in Egypt ever in history. There is no evidence to suggest that crucifixion ever taken place in Egypt. So not only is the time wrong, but the complete act is wrong in the first place. It's just something it didn't happen in Egypt. It was invented by Persians. It's the wrong part of the world. That's our first historical inaccuracy, and the second one's a really good one as well. This Quran verse is talking about King David, and let's read it. Surah 34 verses 10 through 11. Indeed, we granted David a great privilege from us, commanding, O mountains, echo his hymns, and the birds as well. We made iron moldable for him. Indeed, we granted David a great privilege from us, commanding, O mountains, echo his hymns, and the birds as well. We made. Let's see. Did I write that twice? Ah, I sure did. I sure did write that twice. Man, I messed up. I'm gonna see if I can. While we're here, since I actually wrote that twice and messed it up, I'm gonna see if I can find the actual verse right here in my book, just really quick, because so this can make sense to you guys. Apologies. Give me 1 second. Here we go. And what's supposed to be here, not repeated the second time, verse 11 is, make long coats of mail, we said, and fix their links, and do the right. So the question is, how did King David have chainmail? King David lived in the Bronze Age, not the Iron Age. Chainmail wasn't invented until 200 BC, and King David lived around 1000 BC. Says we made iron moldable for him. How? The people weren't using iron in 1000 BC, not for chainmail, not at all. So that's another historical inaccuracy with the Quran. It gets that's what I mean by them assuming that because things are the way they were in their world, that therefore it had to be that same way in the past. It shows that this was written by a man and not God. All-knowing being would understand that chainmail didn't exist when King David lived. Let's see. Here's our third historical inaccuracy, which is about Mary. Now, the Quran makes a claim that Mary is the sister of Moses and Aaron. Now, anyone who's a Christian should know what the problem with that is. Moses and Aaron existed 1,500 years before Mary did. So when Mary gave, so I'm assuming the Islamic belief is that when Mary gave birth to Jesus, she was 1,500 years old. So she would have been the oldest person to ever live. Now, Moses and Aaron did have a sister named Miriam. However, the Quran makes the mistake of confusing that Miriam with the same Miriam that birthed Jesus. And the proof of this is right here in 66:12. There is also the example of Mary, the daughter of Imran, who guarded her chastity, talking about her virginity. So we breathed into her womb through our angel Gabriel. She testified to the words of her Lord in his scriptures. It's talking about the birth of Christ. Because Muslims do believe that Jesus was a prophet. They just don't believe he was God. So the Quran's confusing the Miriam, the sister of Moses and Aaron, with the same Miriam that birthed Jesus. And like I said, the problem with that is that they lived 1,500 years before Mary. Now, Muhammad obviously didn't know that because he was illiterate. Literally, he was illiterate. He couldn't read and or write. So he would have had a very limited understanding of the Bible and the narrative of the Bible. That's why you see him confusing so many things. Muhammad would have just heard the Bible orally. You know, he wouldn't have been able to read or write it, so he would have just been heard it spoken to him. So it makes sense to why he would have butchered so many stories and butchered so many things and just got it completely wrong. So the next historical inaccuracy we'll go to, which is also a really good one, is talking about Joseph. And for those of you who are familiar in the story in Genesis, where Joseph's brothers, you know, they sell him into slavery, and you know he ends up becoming really wealthy and doing very well. That's what this story is referring to. So let's read Surah 20:21. They later sold him for a cheap price, just a few silver coins, only wanting to get rid of him. The man from Egypt who brought him said to his wife, "Take good care of him. Perhaps he may be useful to us, or we may adopt him as a son. This is how we established Joseph in the land, so that we might teach him the interpretation of dreams." Um, what's the problem with this? Joseph lived in ancient Egypt around 1800 BC. Coins weren't used as currency until the 6th century BC. No one in the ancient world used coins as currency until the 6th century BC. Um, and Joseph lived 1,200 years before that. So we have this 1,200-year gap. So it's like if the Quran's written by an all-knowing being, why does it get this wrong about Joseph being sold for coins? It's more likely that Joseph would have been sold for cattle or some physical representation of currency. That's what people use in the ancient world. Your wealth was based off of what you had, not pennies that you made that you just assign a value to. Things actually had value in the ancient world. Cattle, you could eat from cattle. You could get milk from cattle. Things that had actual physical value, not just something you assigned to it. It's another historical inaccuracy within the Quran. Now, after those scientific and historical inaccuracies, that's right there is plenty enough to prove that this book wasn't written by an all-knowing being. But to get a little bit further into why Islam is a false religion, let's talk about the character and the actions of the Prophet Muhammad and who this man was. Now, the sources for these are going to be not the Quran, but Hadith. Like Sahih al-Bukhari will be a few of these. So we're going to go with the first one, narrated Aisha, which was one of the wives, and in fact the favorite wife of the Prophet, that the Prophet married her when she was 6 years old, and he consummated his marriage when she was 9 years old. Hisham said, "I have been informed that Aisha remained with the Prophet for 9 years until his death." So Muhammad died when she was about 18. And we'll read the second one from Sahih Muslim. I'm sorry if I butcher these names. This person reported that this person saw Allah's apostle kissing Hassan. He said, "I have 10 children, but I have never kissed any one of them." Whereupon Allah's messenger said, "He who does not show mercy towards his children, no mercy would be shown to him." And Hassan is a little boy, like a little 10-year-old boy. So what do we get from this? Muhammad was a pedophile. He liked children. He was caught kissing boys. There's also a hadith about him kissing a boy on his private parts, but I didn't include that in here because I thought everything else would be plenty enough. And his favorite wife was Aisha, who he married when she was 6, and then I'm gonna say rape. He raped her when she was 9, because a 9-year-old can't consent. If you think a 9-year-old can consent, you're insane. Let's go next. Narrated by Ibn Abbas. I, Muhammad, put on her my shirt that she may wear the clothes of heaven, and I slept with her in her coffin that I may lessen the presence of the grave. She was the best of Allah's creatures to me after Abu Talib. The Prophet was referring to Fatima, the mother of Ali. So, what do we know from this hadith? Muhammad was a necrophiliac. He had sex with a dead body. And actually, what's also really interesting about this claim is that there's Muslim scholars who recognize this is true. Just in case anyone wants to defend this, a really good book that I encourage every Muslim to read is The People versus Muhammad, a psychological analysis, which goes into detail about how much of a psychopath this man was. But I'm going to read a quick little passage out of this book really quick, just so you guys can understand that Muslim scholars agree that this is true. So let's read. In 2012, contemporary Islamic Moroccan cleric Abid al-Bari al-Zamzami, member of the International Union of Muslim Scholars, publicly decreed that necrophilia is permissible. And here's his quote. "Necrophilia, deplorable, disgraceful act, which is not to be expected from a normal, balanced person. Only mentally or psychologically unbalanced man would do such a thing. In any case, I do not have the right to prohibit things. Fatwas are not shaped according to one's will or whim. Rather, they reflect the law of Allah. Therefore, I do not have the right to prohibit that act. The evidence I relied upon in this case was that a wife's death does not sever her marital relations with her husband. She remains his wife post-mortem. The husband has the right to do whatever he wants with her. Having sex with your wife's corpse is permitted but not commendable. And that's from a 2012 conference with Muslim scholars. And the reason that they said this is permissible is because their prophet did it. And in Islam, the Prophet Muhammad is supposed to be the role model for all of humans of all time. So if you're a Muslim, then I'm sure you're fine with having sex with a dead body, because Muhammad did it, and he's a role model, right? No, incorrect. And then we'll get to, I think this is the last one. I think this is the last slide. Atrocities. Do not hurt me with Aisha, for the inspiration did not come upon me when I was in a woman's garment, except that of Aisha. Sahih al-Bukhari. What do we know from this? Muhammad was a cross-dresser. So let me ask you guys a question, especially my Muslim friends. A true prophet of God, do you think a true prophet of God would wear women's clothing when he's a man, sleep with little girls who are 6, 9 years old, and kiss little boys? And I don't understand the logic there. I don't understand how that makes sense to you, or how you guys defend or justifying these things. So if any Muslims are watching this video, why do you follow Muhammad? Genuinely speaking, why do you follow this man? He was a sex addict. He was a psychopath. It's just terrible, nasty things. And not to mention that the book he wrote that he claimed was from Allah is full of stuff that's just not true. So that's the end of the slides, man. That's the end of the presentation. I don't really have too much more to say. This won't be the only video I do on Islam, but I just wanted to do like a little starter, a little intro video. I feel like that's plenty enough to know it's false right there. I don't think you need too much more than the first 3 or 4 slides. But it's just sad. It's really sad how many people are led astray by a man that claimed to be spoken to by God, when in reality he wasn't. He used that claim in order to feed his sex drive, and to feed his psychopathy. There we go, psychopathy, and all of those nasty needs. It's just terrible. It honestly is. I think that's plenty enough to prove why Islam was a false religion right there. But with that being said, I appreciate you guys for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, make sure you like, subscribe, comment, and let me know if you have any suggestions for the next video. But with all that being said, y'all have a wonderful night.